Now, talking about the aspect of the body, the mind, and the soul, which would translate as al-jasad, al-qalb, wal-ruh. First of all, I think it is important for us to try to connect how mind is translated as qalb. Because, yes, qalb, from a literal point of view, it means the heart, but also it has been used to mean the mind too in the Quran. So doesn't Allah say in the Quran about lahum qulubun la yafqahuna biha? They do have qulub and they don't do fiqh with the qulub. So if fiqh is understanding, of course the hearts don't understand. Hearts pump blood. They pump blood and they are so place of emotions. And if Allah connects qulub, what we would call hearts, and fiqhi, and we know fiqhi is coming from the mind, then it means that there is a connotation inside the word qalb that talks about the mind. So I think it is important for us to address these three concepts and see how Islam talks about them. Is it only that we are supposed to focus on the bodies, because there are movements all around the world that tell you focus on your body. There are other movements that say
do what makes you happy.
Do what makes you happy. Some other movements are like, no, please focus on your soul. Forget about your body. Forget about everything else. Focus about the health of your soul. And also some other people are like, I'm living my life my way. So long as it makes me happy, love who loves you, hate who hates you, everything that makes you happy. So is there anything in the religion that drives us to a point that we need to keep all these things in balance?
I'm thinking at the mind, body and soul, in a way. What about when someone appreciates the desires from the soul?
Yes.
The emotions from the body,
yes,
and probably the mind and the qalb, just like you've explained, has a task of regulating the desires and emotions.
Well, of course, the desires are going to come from the ruh, and the emotions are going to be fired up and fulfilled by the body.
Actually, the approach would be if a human being is more emotional always, then they are at risk. If at all they always follow their desires, that's not a place for a Muslim human being, sane one, to follow. At one point they need a regulator. This is a mind that has to keep in
everything
play.
Because when you talk about the ruh, the nafs, Allah says, Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bisu. It is constantly persuading us, constantly encouraging, commanding us to doing bad things. And if this human being lacks a balance, how are they going to? One famous saying that says Allah created the angels and He gave them the sound intellect, and He did not give them things to do with emotions and shahawat, desires whatsoever. Actually, desires is the right word, because they do have emotions. And Allah created animals. He gave them sound desires that their intellect, their desires no borders of intellect. Then He created us and He gave us this distinctive tool that was going to help us regulate. If we open up towards our desires, then it means we are going to behave like animals, or even worse. Ulaika kal an'am bal hum adall. We tend to be like animals, or even worse. So it means we need to check all these three aspects, especially if we are dealing with issues to deal with someone's health from a mental perspective. The imbalance of the body, mind, and soul causes this.
I really think a human being has to understand how at times it's difficult to stay a human being.
Yes.
Because if we talk of the mind regulating your desires and your emotions, it sounds like something easy, but when you put oxygen into it, it's something a bit challenging. Because if you talk of someone going more emotional, then Allah is like ulaika kal an'am. There's no difference if you
they're
can't
opening up easily to their desires.
To their desires. So you can't be a victim to your desires.
Yes.
But we are not saying that you're not supposed to be emotional at a point.
Yes.
You're not supposed to follow desires.
I think here there is a difference between being emotional and opening up to your desires.
Exactly.
Because we do have emotions, but I think how we react to those emotions is what differentiates us from animals. Because when these emotions come up and about in animals, they just put them to action. But human beings have a regulator, that is the mind. And I think this is the faculty of the three that governs and regulates. If we focus on the qalb, the mind,
that's
very
the mind.
well. Yeah.
So I think we are taking it up as a task for each one of us to make sure they are sane, their mental health is perfect, because if at all it isn't, then probably the regulator is affected.
Yeah, it is compromising, and obviously it is compromising the purpose of our creation. Because if there is an imbalance between your body and your soul, it means a lot of things. Okay, we were souls in the beginning, and if Allah decided to give us bodies, why do we need to neglect the well-being of the bodies and the soul? So if our minds are playing an important role in regulating the body and the soul, it very well means mental health, mental support needs to be an issue. Because if my mind, if my qalb is not at ease, then it means the balancing between the body. That is why you find when someone goes through a traumatizing situation and they're like, if the mind is now affected, the balance of what they are going to do comes up. The imbalance appears. You find someone neglecting everything that is even of benefit to their bodies, of benefit to their prayers, to their spiritual well-being. A calamity comes up in the mental faculty, and they're like, I'm not going to pray again. A calamity comes up and like, what do I need this world for?
They're lost in the journey.
Sometimes some people commit suicide because the imbalance has come in the mental health. I think this is explained better by the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, "Ala inna fil jasadi mudghah." There is a muzzle of flesh in each of our bodies. إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله. If this muzzle of flesh is healthy, is sound, if it is at ease, if it has attained its pure state, then the whole body is going to.
It really makes sense.
Now,
and I think we are supposed to prioritize our mind in this.
Yes.
Because if the mind is the regulator of this, that means it's really improper if a human being turns out being leaning on one side and leaving out the other. Because what differentiates us from any other creature out there is our sound mind. The ability of regulating between the emotions and desires. Because as a human being, you're going to desire. Let's talk about sexual desires for youths. So if at all you don't put the mind in the play, then you might end out fornication, adultery, and so whatever. So Islamically, we might not appreciate that it's the desires, because what makes you a human being is the ability of keeping them in check. And even when you have the desire to steal, the desire to abuse, the desire to offend,
your control.
You have the control over that. Even when you get upset, you're sad at a point, you keep the emotions in check because you have a regulator. You know when to get sad, to home, at the right time, and in that journey.
So that is explained well when you talk about the dua of Ibrahim, when he was also part of his explanation of his dua. He was like, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالُ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ
بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ.
So ultimate safety, which is the purpose of our creation in the hereafter, is based on a healthy heart, and of which in this case we are saying a healthy mind, a qalb that is healthy.
Don't you really think people are supposed to also pay close attention when it comes to seeking remedy for any of these three factors?
Of course, when you're talking about the body, there are a lot of stereotypes, misconceptions, like maybe we shall discuss. And when someone, of course, it is predominant in the Muslim society at every calamity that comes your way, could you please focus on on supplication, make dua, focus on your relationship with Allah, and it reaches even to a point that someone gets a physical distress, a physical calamity, and they are not seeking physical remedy primarily. They would consider seeking physical remedies as not being religious, in a way that if I'm having a physical illness, if I make dua, everything is going to be well, and we need to put that in check. Of course, dua, supplication, making our spiritual understanding balanced,
it is
default, it is running behind the scenes. But I think we are supposed to still check all these aspects. If I am having a physical illness, it is important for me, because when you break your leg, you don't make dua for the leg to come back. The leg doesn't come back with dua, the leg comes back with physical working.
You don't want to dare God to make a miracle.
You're not going to risk losing the leg in waiting for the miracle. Also, same thing has to happen with our minds too. Our minds are so important, because we've seen that this is the faculty that governs it. And if our minds are not in the proper state of well-being, it means that it is important for us to seek for remedies that pertain to the
I think at one point we shared a story where someone was actually battling something to do with mental illness. And he made himself believe that it's something to do with jinns, demons, something like that, instead of trying out to seek for some help from the caretakers or maybe the professionals and whatever. And that means, as Muslims, we are supposed to also appreciate, or maybe as human beings, the aspect of praying to Allah is a tool that works, definitely, but at some point you're supposed to do something in line with what you've supplicated.
And by doing that, we are balancing human effort and divine intervention.
Exactly.
So you're doing something, and the Almighty finds you on the way.
Just remember when the story of Musa alayhi salam, when Allah was just about to do a miracle for him, when Allah gave him an order to use the stick, al-bahr, to hit the river, so that Allah paves way into the mirror, like into the river. So if you think in that aspect, Allah, it was very possible for Allah to just be like,
for the miracle to happen from out
without Musa doing anything. And it doesn't logically sit in our minds that a stick can actually pave a way in a mirror. So it is also a lesson for someone to understand that if Allah is guiding the Prophet to do something, for Allah to do something, then
we are more in need.
Exactly. It's healthy for us to make sure we put a reason for Allah to do the magic, unless instead of just being like, okay, let me be in my comfort zone and battle my physical illness, and battle my mental illness, and battle my soul illness, whatever, without, it might not be easy for you to go through that.
So it means, just as we've said, it is very much important to focus on our minds. If this is the faculty that runs every other faculty of our existence, then it means if anything is concerning our mind, we need to look at all ways in which we can settle that, and that is the mental illness we are discussing about.